In New Orleans, a ship called the Genesis arrives at the docks to deliver several containers containing mysterious cargoes that will be distributed throughout the city. Meanwhile, Biggie gathers a group of traders, including Newt, and introduces them to the latest version. It's called Power, and it gives people special abilities for 5 minutes. Biggie is giving away the spinning top for free to retailers and even allows them to sell it at any price. Sometime later, Robin sneaks out of his house set to sell some electricity on the street. The 3 teenagers notice that it is a little girl named and try to get her to steal the top. A fight breaks out as Robin tries to defend himself, but in the middle of the fight they are interrupted by police officer Frank, who forces them to stop by showing his gun. The boy puts the top in his mouth to gather strength to fight it. Frank explains that this power hurt people or even caused them to explode. While the boy hesitates, Frank takes the lead and arrests Robin, forcing the boys to flee. When they are alone, Frank releases Robin and reveals that he is her friend. He buys her electricity and even gives her an old motorcycle for her birthday. The next day, Art goes to an apartment in the slums to look for Newt, who points a gun at him from behind the door and refuses to open it when Art asks where power comes from. Using a trick to open the lock anyway, Art makes his way inside and discovers Newt has become incredibly disfigured because of his addiction. He's also keeping a huge stash of power in his apartment with an alligator as a guard. Next, Art threatens Newt with a weapon, and when Newt tries to grab his, Art shoots it away. While Art steals Newt's phone, Newt runs to hide in another room and takes power to activate his ability, which sets his whole body on fire. After a failed attack that starts a fire in the room, Newt starts chasing Art through the building, causing him to fall off an edge. Art manages to hold on at the last second and jumps into room on the first floor as Newt feels his body weakening. So he takes 3 more cans and goes after Art, but is doused by a neighbor. Art takes the opportunity to rush to the bathroom and soak S jacket with water. When Newt grabs him, Art covers him with a jacket and pushes him into S-filled bathtub. Newt initially refuses to talk, so Art begins beating him until he admits that he received power from Biggie. At that moment, Newt's body begins to shake, causing Art to run away just before Newt explodes. This brings back memories of the car accident he had with his daughter. Meanwhile, Robin takes care of his sick mother Irene before going to school. During lesson, Robin texts Newt asking for more power, and Art responds with Newt's phone. Suddenly, the teacher calls her out for inattention and asks what her future will look like. A friend mentions that she's a great rapper and starts creating a beat for Robin's freestyle. So a nervous Robin starts rapping against the system and her teacher. Her classmates record everything and cheer for her, but it later turns out that it was just a fantasy in Robin's head. The teacher asks her to hand over her phone or go to the principal's office, so she decides to leave. Later, the police surround a bank where a criminal with mysterious powers has taken hostages. Frank takes his colleague's place, and when no one is looking, he takes over the power and starts the timer on his clock. He goes in through the back door and finds the hostages, unaware that the thief is moving nearby undetected because he has stealth abilities. The guy hits Frank to knock him out, then runs off with the money, so Frank immediately starts chasing him and the bags. As his skin constantly changes color, the thief escapes and runs over several civilians before stealing S bike. He ends up getting hit by a car, so he abandons the bike and gets on a tram instead. As he checks the bag, a gunpowder bomb explodes and reveals his location, so Frank can now follow on his bike. The driver stops as Frank shows his ID and the thief runs off again, crossing the cafe and ending up in an alley. Frank follows him and falls, allowing Guy to take the gun and shoot him. However, Frank's power is to be super tough and the bullet just bounces, allowing Frank to quickly recover and finally grab the guy, beating up him with extra strength until his captain makes him stop. After everything is over, the captain scolds Frank for using power and asks for his gun and badge. Frank points out that criminals have an advantage over them if they have superpowers, so this is the only way to fight fairly. There are also higher-ups often coming to cover up the situation, so Frank can guess the captain knows more than he says and offers to work off the record. The captain decides to give Frank a picture of Art and tells him he is believed to be the source of power, so they need to catch him to end their problems. That evening, Art waits for at the restaurant where Robin usually meets Newt. When Robin arrives, he watches her from a distance, but doesn't approach her. Robin doesn't see Newt and decides to leave, but discovers that her bike tire has been slashed. Suddenly, Art grabs her and throws her in the back of his truck, then takes her to a remote area and stalks her when she doesn't talk. Robin agrees to cooperate and is released as she tells him that she received her power from Newt, but doesn't know anything else. Art then shows her a photo of a woman and a bald man, but she doesn't recognize either of them. As they talk, Robin texts Frank asking for help and Art immediately picks up her phone. Art then gets the number to call them using the number he found in Newt's phone. She pretends to be the troubled merchant and tells them to go to a specific supermarket and look for questions about alligator wine. The duo make it to market, and while Robin asks for wine, Art becomes distracted by a random customer and loses sight of Robin. The girl is led to a man named Quayo in the background, and instead of asking about the source like Art told her, she tells Quayo all about the creepy guy waiting outside. Quayo gathers his strength and confronts Art, who threatens Quayo with a pair of scissors. His henchmen immediately come to his aid, but Art proves to be an excellent fighter and easily goes into close combat with against anyone. At the same time, the office Robin is in begins to move and discovers that the room is in a huge truck that is about to leave. She tries to get out, but the door is locked. Art is constantly knocking guys out or knocking them down, and sometimes bullets hit the truck, forcing Robin to hide to avoid getting hit. After all the henchmen are killed, Art tries to check on Robin, and Quayo is suddenly able to shoot him. The bullet hits Art, but he keeps moving and shoots Quayo too. Then Art finally opens the door to save Robin, but the pain causes him to hallucinate and think Robin is his lost daughter Tracy. Luckily, Robin's voice snaps him out of the state, and he notices another door, which he swings open, revealing a secret computer room with monitors monitoring all the power users. Art realizes that the dealer is giving away free electricity because he is using the locals as lab rats to test the product. You will also find a reference to a presentation that will take place in approximately 2 hours. Thanks to S' still effective force effect, Quayo manages to push the bullets out of his body. While Art is distracted by the screen, Robin runs back to the market and asks for help, but Quayo finds him and shoots him down. When he tries to stab her, Art knocks him out and stabs him again and again until the effects of the power wear off and Quayo dies. Robin tries to escape and finds the doors are locked, so he grabs a brick to break them open. However, Art asks for help and admits that he just wants to find his daughter and offers Robin a lot of money before passing out. Moments later, Art wakes up in the vet's office where Robin is stitching up his wounds. When he gets better, he sets off for a special event and Robin forces him to take her with him by stealing S car keys. Meanwhile, Frank becomes worried about Robin and goes to her house only to hear police officers chasing Irene. Frank sneaks into the house through a window and disguises himself by posing as Irene's lover to defend her. He whispers to her that he is Robin's boyfriend before confronting the police and asking them to show the camera her badge and search warrant. The cops immediately disappear, so Frank runs after them and connects his phone to their car to find them. On the way to the event, Art explains that he used to be soldier and that Telios was conducting experiments for power. One day he took power and almost killed him, but he survived, unlike his army friends. He eventually left the company and began a new life but when Tracy was born, she had permanent authority since the component was already functioning. Seed of Art. When Telios heard about this, they wanted to take Tracy to experiment on her, so Art tried to run away with her. Unfortunately, they were followed and the henchmen crashed their car. Art was stuck and couldn't move, so he had to watch as Tracy was kidnapped. As he tells the story memories mix with reality and he starts driving like crazy, but luckily Robin saves him from the situation before an accident occurs. They finally reach the presentation location and Art has Robin wait outside. When Art comes in, the guard tries to stop him because he's not on the list, so Art quickly knocks him out and finds the Telios card among the documents of. Then Art takes the guard's jacket and sneaks into the presentation, pretending to be an associate of. Biggie introduces power to the leader of the South American cartel and explains that his goal is to help reach the next level of evolution. They used the DNA of various animals to collect best survival skills so that humans could have them too, and Biggie hopes that with the help of his guest investment, they can one day create a permanent version of the Force. Meanwhile, Frank finds Robin outside and tries to convince her that Art is behind power, but she refuses to believe him. When he returns to Biggie, he asks the woman to climb into the tank and take some of the power. Her skin immediately begins to freeze, and it is revealed that she can control her body temperature. As she spits ice onto glass for fun, Art silently approaches the bartender and kills him with an ice statue. Art then approaches Biggie with a gun hidden under a tray, but Biggie recognizes his face. Art tries to threaten him, but then the clerk finds the body and screams, so he hits him and takes hostage instead. A group of people in the room pull out guns and Art threatens to kill Biggie, but it doesn't happen to the cartel woman. She gets worried and tries to leave with Power's suitcase. Then another of Biggie's men arrive to stop the woman, and one of them takes a dose of power but immediately explodes. This leads to a shootout between Biggie's men and the ladies, causing both sides to quickly lose men as Art also enters the fight. The two bodyguards manage to provide cover for the cartel lady and help her escape while Biggie tries to get to safety, dropping the tablet in the process. This causes the tank to begin to fail and the woman loses control of her power. She screams in pain as her boyfriend tries to kick the tank, but she can't. Art beats up S boyfriend while Biggie continues to avoid him, and eventually the freeze takes over the woman's body, causing to slowly freeze every inch of her skin until she dies. Art manages to grab and shake Biggie while demands answers, but the clerk punches him and a melee ensues. After she smashes her head into a tank, Art uses his stun gun to knock her out and then goes after Biggie again. He shoots Biggie's finger off and shows him the photo, so Biggie finally explains that it was Dr. Gardner, the head of the project, and her bodyguard Wallace were the ones who kidnapped Tracy. They can be found on a boat called Genesis, which is carrying out the entire operation. At this point, Frank gets inside and tries to arrest Art, but Art quickly disarms him. As they fight over Robin, Biggie takes a dose of the power and begins to transform into a giant monster that slams into the ceiling, causing the entire building to shake. The bullets don't hurt him, so Art runs away and Frank catches up to him and slips under Biggie. The duo walks down a back hallway, and as they run, Art opens a few cans of gasoline and Frank steals some of the power. As they reach the exit, Art shoots gas valves, causing a large explosion that kills Biggie and sends a shockwave into the street before Biggie's hand lands on the car. Afterwards, Frank arrests Art, and when Robin tries to defend him, Art simply tells her to go home. While Robin is getting on her bike, she sees Wallace among the police officers and recognizes him from Art's photo so she decides to follow him. Meanwhile, Art tells Frank that in a few seconds his captain will tell him to take him somewhere other than the train station. His prediction comes true, and Frank realizes that his captain is one of Telio's bribed men in the squad. Frank eventually listens on Art and learns that his daughter was the role model they used to create the power that will transfer to the rest of the world if they don't stop it. They agree to work together and make a plan. When Telio's men surround the machine in the year, where he meets Gardner, who experimented on him during his military service. Robin is watching nearby and Frank is angry to see her when he arrives. After a pointless argument, Frank gives her special headphones so that she can watch over him and inform him of everything that is happening in the area. Frank then takes some of the power and approaches the guard, who shoots him before leaving the door open, because he believes Frank is dead. Thanks to his power, Frank recovers quickly but loses the bud that connects him to Robin when he sneaks in, knocks out the guard and surprises him from behind. Worried about losing contact, Robin decides to infiltrate and hides in a van that is being loaded onto the ship. Robin then searches control room and finds Frank handcuffing a group of unconscious workers. On the monitors, the guys accompanying Species ask to open the door, so Robin presses the button as cover. They realize that there is a map to S ship and full access to all doors, so Frank takes the gun and earpiece, asks Robin to guide him as he goes to save Art. After he leaves, Robin closes the very heavy door for security reasons. At that moment, the alarm goes off and Wallace takes power to break down the doors of. As Robin looks at various monitors, he finds Tracy and is distracted, so the reinforced security guard finds Frank and quickly disarms him. A melee ensues, but Frank can't do any damage because the guy is made of rubber. In the fight, Frank loses S earpiece again and Robin has to talk to him over the speakers, so Wallace finds their location and starts hitting them with the door. Frank gets stuck in a tight rubber hold but manages to punch Guy and free himself before dragging the man to a nearby door. Robin immediately closes it and the guy's hand gets stuck, meaning it will break when the effects of the power wear off. At this point, Wallace finally breaks down the thick door and discovers that Robin broke the computer with S-axe and escaped through the escape hatch. As the ship takes off, Frank gains even more strength before, retrieves his weapon and continues his search. Meanwhile, Art reveals that a dose of force has been injected into his mouth the entire time and convinces the guard to let him go to avoid the consequences of his powers. Just then, Wallace and Frank find him, so Wallace punches Frank before turning to Art. Frank gives the gun to Art, who shoots Wallace twice, easily killing him. Returning to Robin, she searches the lab and hears a security guard approaching. So she hides and waits for the right moment to strike him from behind. She then takes his key card and finally gains entry to the lab facilities, where finds Tracy and notices the scars on her body from experiments. Tracy is suspicious at first, but when she hears that her father is here, she is immediately overjoyed. Suddenly, Gardner comes looking for Tracy, but the girls manage to hide under the hatch in time. They then run away, and on the way out of room, a random plant regains health when Tracy touches it. They soon reach deck and are reunited with Frank and Art, who finally hug their daughter again. The group attempts to find a way out of all of S containers, but are suddenly blocked by a guard who has the power to grow his bones into weapons. A fight ensues, and the guy cuts Art's weapon in half with bone, so Art grabs a metal rod to protect himself. Frank tries to get the girls to the lifeboat using his body as protection from the incoming bullets, but Robin sees Art in danger and returns to help him. She releases the hook to knock down the guard, then Art kills him by stabbing him with his bones. Afterwards, Art rushes to the lifeboat to reunite with the others, but Robin is caught by S-guards and Gardner asks for Tracy in return for Robin's life. Art goes and takes the power, giving the ability of a pistol shrimp. This allows him to vaporize the water around him and fire extremely hot shockwaves that kill all henchmen in seconds. Robin jumps towards just in time as all the containers fall over and a crane falls on Gardner. Species faints because his body cannot withstand the force, meaning he is on the verge of death. But Tracy comes to him immediately and heals him with her powers. The group can now board lifeboat and finally escape. Sometime later, Art tells Frank that he is leaving Tracy to start a new life. Frank plans to tell the story to a journalist so he can expose all the corruption in the police force, and Robin returns to his mother, promising to take care of her with the money Art gave her as a thank you.